The space station was cold and loud, filled with the sound of footsteps, engines, and voices shouting in many languages. Kelra sat on the hard metal floor near Dock 14. Her knees sore, her back hunched, and her arms wrapped around her thin, sick child. His small body shivered under the torn blanket, his skin pale blue and dry. She held him tighter, trying to keep him warm. For hours she had begged the rich traders walking by, begged the transport workers rushing past, begged the security bots, even though she knew they didn't care. But no one stopped. Some looked at her with disgust, others turned their heads away, pretending not to hear her voice. One alien even laughed, tossing an empty food wrapper at her feet. Her voice was dry now, broken from crying and pleading. "Please," she whispered, "just give me something to do. Anything. My son needs food." The boy coughed, a weak sound, sharp and painful. Her heart cracked again, just like it had every day since her husband died. He was killed when their village was raided. Kelra had escaped with her son, hiding in the cargo hold of a smuggler ship. Now they were here, stranded, unwanted, alone. A new wave of people walked by. A few glanced at her, but quickly moved on. Then, a pair of human boots stopped in front of her. Kelra looked up, blinking in surprise. The man was tall, his jacket old and dirty, his face rough but not unkind. "Can you work?" he asked, his voice calm. Kelra couldn't believe it. Someone had actually spoken to her. "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, I can. Please, anything." He looked at her for a few seconds, his eyes serious. He nodded. "Follow me," Kelra stood up fast, holding her child close. Her legs were weak, but she followed the man through the station. They passed food stalls, cargo piles, and repair zones. Finally, they reached a small shop with a flickering sign, "Mason's Repairs." The man Mason opened the door. The place smelled like oil and metal. Tools hung on the walls, wires lay in bundles, and broken machines sat on workbenches. "You get one day," Mason said. "If you're lazy or steal, you're out." Kelra nodded quickly. "I won't steal. And I'll work hard." She placed her son in the corner on a soft pile of old rags. Then she walked over to the nearest table. Mason handed her a broken fan motor. "Fix this," he said, handing her a tool. Kelra held it, confused. She had never seen human tools before. But she had sharp eyes, clever fingers, and strong memory. She stared at the motor, touched the wires gently, and then began to work. At first, she made mistakes, cut the wrong wire, dropped a screw. Mason watched from the side, arms crossed, but she didn't stop. Hours passed, her hands turned black from grease. Her back ached, but she didn't stop. Her child slept nearby, coughing now and then. By evening, the motor hummed softly, spinning again. Mason raised an eyebrow. "Not bad," he said. "How'd you figure it out?" Kelra looked down, unsure if he was angry or impressed. "I watched and listened to how it moved. My people fix things differently, but I learned fast." Mason nodded again and handed her another machine. "You'll fix this tomorrow," he said, walking to the back room. "You and your kid can sleep in the storeroom for now." Tears filled Kelra's eyes, but she held them back. "Thank you," she whispered. Mason didn't respond, but he paused before shutting the door. "Don't make me regret this," he said, then disappeared inside. Kelra looked at her son, who had curled up peacefully. She sat beside him, pulling the blanket over both of them. For the first time in many nights, the fear in her chest was a little lighter. A stranger had given her a chance, and she would not waste it. Kelra woke early, before the station lights turned to day mode. Her son was still sleeping. Curled in the old cloth Mason had given her, she quietly stood, stretched her stiff legs, and walked into the workshop. The air smelled like hot metal and grease. Machines buzzed faintly in the walls, and a dim light flickered above the main workbench. It felt strange to be indoors, not hiding, not running, just working. Mason was already there, wearing the same old brown jacket. He didn't look at her, just pointed to a machine on the table. "This one," he said simply. "It's a power fuse converter." Burned out, Kelra nodded and stepped forward. She picked up a tool and leaned over the open panel. Inside, wires were twisted and scorched. She had no idea what a fuse converter was, but she listened carefully, remembered what she had learned the day before, and began. Sparks flew the moment she cut the wrong line. She jumped back, hissing. Her fingers singed. Mason looked over but said nothing. She glanced at him. His face showed no anger, just quiet watching. Her hands trembled. She picked up the wire again and worked more slowly this time. Bit by bit, she cleaned, stripped, and connected the lines. Hours passed. Kelra didn't speak much, but her movements grew more confident. She stopped, shaking. She even started humming quietly. A lullaby from her homeworld. Her child woke and sat in the corner with a small datapad Mason had given him. The boy traced glowing shapes on the screen, smiling for the first time in days. Mason walked over once, handing her a drink. "Hydration gel?" he muttered. "Better than nothing." She took it with both hands, nodding. "Thank you." By noon, the converter was fixed. It buzzed and glowed a steady blue. Mason walked over, checked her work, and gave a short grunt. "You sure you weren't an engineer before?" he asked. Kelra blinked, surprised. "No, I was a field cook," she said quietly, "before the soldiers came." Mason didn't push further. He walked back to his own corner and began repairing a damaged drone. Later that day, the shop door opened with a hiss. A tall, red-skinned alien walked in. Holding a broken arm unit, he looked around, his sharp eyes landing on Kelra. "What's she doing here?" he barked. "She works here," Mason answered flatly, not looking up. The alien laughed, a Varnari widow. "That's bad luck." Kelra's hands clenched under the table, but she said nothing. The alien dropped the device with a loud thud. "Fix that. I'll be back in 2 hours." Then he left without another word. Kelra stared at the device. Looked complex and broken in strange ways, but she didn't hesitate. She got to work. Mason finally spoke after a long silence. "You know, most people don't even touch those things." Kelra kept working. "I don't have a choice," she said. "If I stop, he'll take my child." Mason looked up, frowning. "Who?" She hesitated, then said, "The ones who branded me. They're still looking, and they don't care if he's a child. They'll sell him too." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Mason didn't respond, but his eyes narrowed. He reached into a drawer and tossed her a better tool. "Use this. Less chance of it shocking you." She caught it and nodded, again whispering, "Thank you." By the time the red-skinned alien returned, the armament was fully working. He picked it up, tested it, and grunted. Didn't expect a female to get it right. Kelra didn't reply, but Mason stepped forward. "You insult her again. You fix your own damn tech." The alien stared at him for a moment, then walked out without another word as the door closed. Kelra turned to Mason. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. Mason shrugged. "I don't like bullies." Kelra looked down, feeling something strange, a warmth in her chest. It wasn't just safety, it was respect, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. That night, after she tucked her son in, she sat on the floor of the storage room and stared at her hands. They were dirty, cut, burned slightly, but they were useful. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt like a person again. Kelra stood in the quiet of the workshop, cleaning up the tools long after the last customer left. Mason had gone out to pick up parts from a nearby trader. Her son was sleeping peacefully in the back room. Wrapped in the now warm cloth blanket, she hummed softly to herself, an old lullaby from her childhood. Her hands moved with purpose, putting everything in its place, each wire, each wrench, each bolt carefully organized. She wanted to prove she was worth keeping. The room was dim now, lit only by the soft orange glow of a broken light bulb Mason hadn't fixed yet. Kelra wiped her brow and pulled off her outer coat. Her thin shirt stuck to her back, soaked from hours of work. She sighed and reached back to untie it, needing a little air, but she forgot Mason had returned. The door opened quietly. He stepped in, holding a small container of synth oil. He froze. Eyes catching something strange burned into her upper back was a black mark, deep and twisted. It looked like a circle of chains. Old, scarred, and permanent. Kelra heard the silence. She turned. Dan realized too late that he had seen it. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with fear. She dropped her coat and took a small step back. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Please. Don't throw me out." Mason said nothing for a moment. He set the synth oil down and crossed his arms. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Kelra looked down, her voice shaking. "It's a slave mark," she whispered. From the Sarek raiders, Mason's expression didn't change, but something in his jaw tightened. "They came to our village," she continued, voice trembling, "killed the males, took the rest. I ran with my son. But before I escaped, they caught me and marked me as property." She reached back and touched the scar. "It means anyone can claim me, take me, sell me, use me." The room was silent. Only the soft hum of a cooling fan could be heard. "I didn't tell you," she said, eyes still on the ground, "because I thought you'd be like the others. That you'd use me, or turn me in for a reward." Mason walked slowly to the bench, sat down, and rubbed his hand over his face. He didn't speak right away, and Kelra's heart raced in her chest. She was ready to run again, ready to grab her son and disappear into the alleys. But then Mason spoke. "I fought in the border wars," he said. "Saw slave marks like that plenty of times." Kelra looked up, confused. "Most of them didn't make it," he added, voice low. "You." Did Kelra blinked, tears stinging her eyes. "You're not throwing me out?" Mason shook his head. "You work hard," he said simply. "And your boys got nothing to do with this." He paused, then added, "Besides, I don't believe in treating people like animals." Kelra couldn't speak. She just nodded slowly. Wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, Mason stood, grabbed a small medkit from the wall, and walked over. "Let me see your back," he said. She hesitated, but then turned, letting her shirt fall low again. Mason gently pressed a cooling gel over the scar. "It'll help with the pain," he said. "Even old marks like this hurt when you work too long," she let out. A small, grateful sigh. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, packed up the medkit, and walked to the back room. As he left, he said over his shoulder, "Don't hide from me again. I don't care about your past. Just do your job." Kelra smiled slightly. It was the first time someone had seen her for more than just the brand on her back. She sat alone in the shop for a while, staring at the silent machines. Something had changed, not just in how Mason saw her, but in how she saw herself. She wasn't just a widow, not just a mother, not just someone with a scar. She was alive, and now she had someone who stood on her side. It was quiet in the workshop that morning. Too quiet. Mason felt it before he saw it. A strange stillness in the station air, like the tension before a storm. The usual background noise, engines humming. Vendors shouting was softer, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Kelra was working at the far table, repairing a broken hover tool. Her son sat beside her, humming and drawing on the datapad Mason had given him. They looked peaceful, like a small family in a place that didn't allow such things. Mason walked to the front of the shop, wiping oil off his hands just as he reached the door. The motion sensor beeped. 3 figures stepped inside. The air turned colder. They weren't customers. They didn't carry machines or broken tools. They carried weapons. Long, sharp-edged blasters designed for control, not defense. Mason narrowed his eyes. The lead alien was tall and dressed in clean, dark armor. A scar ran across his lip, and his eyes were yellow, cold, and unforgiving. The other 2 stood behind him like shadows. Silent but deadly. "We're here for the Varnari female," the leader said. His voice was smooth and practiced, like someone used to giving orders. Kelra froze. Her hand stopped mid-motion, the tool falling with a soft clink onto the table. Her son looked up, confused. Sensing the change, Mason stepped forward. Blocking their view, "She works for me," he said firmly. "You want repairs? Get in line. Otherwise, turn around." The alien gave a slow smile, showing sharp teeth. "You misunderstand." "Human," he said. "She belongs to the Sarek Syndicate. She carries the mark." Kelra stood, her body trembling. Her hand reached back toward her son, pulling him close. "She is not yours to keep." The alien continued. "You're harboring a slave. That's a crime in most systems." Mason didn't flinch. "I don't care about her mark," he said. "I care about what she does in my shop, and she does good work." One of the shadow guards stepped forward, lifting his weapon. Then, "Maybe we take her by force," he growled. Kelra gasped, stepping in front of her son. But before anyone could move further, Mason spoke again, voice cold and steady. "You pull that trigger in my shop, and none of you are walking out." His hand was already near the emergency panel under the counter. One press, and the doors would lock, steel plates would seal the windows, and 2 old but deadly autocannons would rise from the ceiling. The leader paused, eyes narrowing. He studied Mason carefully, realizing something wasn't right. This human wasn't scared. The tension thickened. Then the alien leaned back. "Slightly, fine," he said slowly. "You've made your position clear." But his smile was still there, thin and dangerous. "We'll be back. And next time, we won't be so polite." He turned and walked out, his guards following without a word. The door hissed shut behind them. Silence returned, heavy and sharp. Kelra collapsed into the chair. Holding her son tightly, he clung to her, asking what was happening. She couldn't answer. Mason turned away from the door, his face unreadable. But something burned behind his eyes. "They're not done," he said. "They'll return, and they'll bring more." Kelra looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You should. Let us go. They'll destroy everything." Mason shook his head. "They already tried to destroy you," he said. "Not again." She stared at him in shock. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me? Why risk your life for someone you just met?" Mason sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because once, a long time ago, someone saved me when they didn't have to," he said. "I never got the chance to repay it. Until now." He walked to the back and opened a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was an old metal box, scratched and covered in dust. He opened it and pulled out 2 pulse pistols and a folded body vest. Kelra stood slowly, watching in silence. "You were a soldier," she said again. "More certain this time. I was worse." Mason muttered, checking the charge level on the pistols. "But now, I'm all you've got." Kelra's hands were still shaking, but her heart, it was steady. Mason tossed her a small stun blade. "Time to stop hiding," he said. "Time to fight back." The shop was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that came before a battle. Mason stood at the center of the room, holding an old metal vest in his hands. He hadn't worn it in years. Kelra stood nearby, her son asleep in the back. She was no longer shaking. Her fear was still there, but now it stood behind her, not in front. I thought you fixed machines, she said softly. Mason looked up, strapping the vest across his chest. I do, he said, but before that, I broke a lot of them. She stepped closer, watching as he laid weapons and devices across the table. Grenades, stun fields, pulse triggers, tools of war. Most of them were banned in this sector. And yet here they were, lined up like old friends. Kelra asked quietly, Where did you get these? Mason smirked. Leftovers from a war nobody wants to remember. He picked up a small cube and pressed it. A projection lit up in the air. Showing a map of the station, red dots glowed around their location. These are the spots they'll allow. Come through, Mason said, pointing. They'll avoid main paths and come in from the shadows. Kelra frowned. You know their moves? Mason nodded. I fought the Syndicate before. They think the same every time. Fast strike, scare the target, and take what they came for. He turned to her, his voice firm. This time, they'll find something else. Kelra walked over and stared at the map. What's the plan? Mason pulled up a second layer on the projection. This building's old, but it's got bones. He said, vent shafts, hidden rooms, reinforced walls. He tapped a section of the floor. There's an old supply cellar under here. That's where you hide your son. Kelra touched her stomach, breathing in deeply. And me? She asked. Mason glanced at her, handing over a stun pistol. You fight, if you're ready. He said, if not, stay with your boy and don't come out unless I tell you. Kelra stared at the weapon. It felt heavy in her hand. Not from weight, but from choice. I won't run this time, she said quietly. I'm tired of running. Mason gave a small nod. Good. They spent hours preparing. Mason taught her how to reload, how to aim, how to set a charge. Her hands were steady now, her eyes sharper. She wasn't a soldier, but she was a mother. And she had lost too much already. Later that night, Mason tapped a code into a hidden comms panel. A screen flickered and a gruff voice answered, Mason Briggs. Still alive, huh? Mason gave a dry chuckle. Need a favor? Gregor, he said. Got Syndicate trouble. The face on the screen frowned. Sarek, boys? Yeah, Mason said. They want something I'm not giving. The man on the other end was silent. For a moment, then he sighed. You always find trouble. I don't find it. Mason said, it finds me. Gregor grunted. I'll send a signal to the old squad. No promises, but some might show up. Mason nodded. That's all I need. When the screen went dark, Kelra walked over. Friends of yours? Something like that, he replied. We fought together once. She looked around the room, now filled with makeshift traps, blinking lights, and sealed crates. This place looks like a war zone, she said. It's about to be, Mason replied, but it's our war now. He handed her a small crystal chip. If I don't make it, take this, he said. It has fake IDs, credits, and coordinates to a safe planet. It'll get you and your son out. Kelra stared at him, shocked. You're planning to die? Mason shrugged. I'm planning to make sure you live. Kelra stepped forward and pushed the chip back into his hand. We both live, she said firmly. Or we both fight. Mason stared at her for a moment, then smiled. It wasn't the smile of a mechanic. It was the smile of a man who remembered what it meant to believe in something again. They stood there in silence for a while. Two broken people, one human, one alien, choosing to stand together, not just to survive, but to protect what mattered, because sometimes small repair shop on a forgotten station becomes the place where everything changes, and sometimes it only takes one promise to start a war the stars will remember. It started with silence, the kind of silence that wasn't natural. Even the hum of the station lights seemed to fade. Mason stood near the front of the shop, pulse pistol in hand. Every door and window was reinforced with steel plates. The traps were armed. The old cannons above, ready to fire. Kelra crouched in the corner. Next to the hatch that led to the underground storage bay, her son was already hidden inside. Curled up in blankets with a small food pack and a flashlight, she kissed his forehead one last time. "Stay here. No matter what you hear, don't come out," he nodded. His eyes wide with fear, but he trusted her. She sealed the hatch and stood. Holding the stun blade Mason had given her, the lights flickered once, then the motion sensor beeped. They were here. Mason's grip tightened. 3 shadows stepped into view through the security camera, then 5 more behind them. This wasn't a team, this was a hit squad. Kelra swallowed hard, her back straight. "They brought an army," she whispered. Mason didn't look at her. "They think we'll roll over," he muttered. "Let's disappoint them." The outer door shook once, twice, then exploded inward in a flash of light and smoke. Aliens stormed in, weapons raised, before they could take 3 steps. The ceiling guns dropped and opened fire. Energy blasts lit the air like lightning, striking 2 attackers down immediately. The others ducked for cover, shouting in rage. Smoke filled the room. Sparks danced across the metal floor. Mason moved like a soldier again. He didn't run, he advanced. Each shot from his pistol was fast and clean, hitting arms, legs, gear non-lethal, but effective. Kelra stayed near the hatch at first, then something changed. One of the Syndicate soldiers noticed her. He charged forward, ignoring the chaos. She held her ground, breathing fast. When he lunged, she sidestepped and struck. The stun blade hummed to life, slicing across the attacker's chest. He dropped. Groaning, stunned cold, Kelra stood over him, shaking but not from fear, from rage, from fire. She had never hurt anyone before, but now she had someone to protect. She had something to fight for. Another raider came at her, but this time she was ready. She rolled aside and fired the stun pistol Mason had trained her with. A direct hit. The alien dropped like stone. Mason shouted from the other side of the shop, "Kelra." Right side. She turned just in time to see 2 attackers flanking her. One raised his weapon, and then something exploded behind them. A grenade Mason had planted in the wall blew, sending both enemies flying. Mason looked back at her, smirking. Nice timing. The battle moved fast. Every corner of the shop turned into a fight zone. Wires sparked, shelves fell, tools flew from the walls. Kelra took a blast to her shoulder and cried out. Falling against a support beam, Mason was at her side. In seconds, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind cover. "You okay?" She nodded, teeth clenched, still breathing. Suddenly, the outer wall behind them cracked. A huge alien brute stepped through, armor glowing red. He was twice Mason's size, carrying a hammer-like weapon. "He's not Syndicate," Kelra gasped. "No," Mason muttered. "He's worse." The brute charged, smashing aside debris. Mason threw Kelra aside and rolled left, barely dodging the swing. The shockwave shattered part of the ceiling. Mason fired once. Twice the brute's armor absorbed the blasts. Kelra climbed to her feet. Limping, she saw the exposed battery core on the brute's back. A weak spot. She grabbed a nearby wire spool and threw it. It hit the core with a loud crack, making the brute turn. Mason saw the opening. He didn't waste it with a shout. He charged, leaped, and jammed his blade into the battery. The brute let out a howl as electricity burst through his body. Then he dropped. Smoking, Kelra rushed to Mason, who lay on the floor, breathing hard. "You're insane," she said. Helping him sit, he laughed. Coughing takes one to know one. Sirens suddenly blared outside. Reinforcement ships docked nearby. Gregor's squad had arrived. Within minutes, the rest of the raiders were surrounded. Weapons dropped, captured or fleeing. Kelra leaned back against the wall, blood on her sleeve. Smoke in her lungs. Mason sat beside her, his vest scorched and cracked. They looked around at the ruined shop. The sparks, the broken tables, and then at each other. "We won," she said, voice quiet. "For now," Mason said. "But it's not over." Kelra nodded. But this time, she wasn't afraid. The shop was gone. What was once a buzzing repair center filled with tools, machines, and sparks was now quiet ash and bent steel. Mason stood beside the wreckage, arms crossed, his jacket torn. A long scar fresh across his cheek. Kelra sat on a crate nearby, her son sleeping with his head in her lap. He clutched a small wooden toy Mason had carved during the long nights while the shop was still standing. Even now, after all the smoke and danger, the boy smiled in his sleep. Gregor's people had done their job. The syndicate raiders had been either arrested, scattered, or hunted down. The leader, the one with the yellow eyes, had disappeared before they arrived. Mason suspected he would return one day, but not soon. "What will you do now?" Kelra asked softly. Mason looked down at the twisted remains of his shop. "Start over, I guess," he said. "Somewhere quieter." Kelra nodded, eyes tired. "We can't stay here either," she said. "Not after what happened." Mason pulled something from his coat and handed it to her. A silver card, smooth and warm, with a blinking light in the corner. Kelra turned it over and gasped. It was a travel permit plus credits, ID, and a citizen registry form. But what shocked her more was the name typed on it. Kelra Briggs. She looked up at him, confused. This has your family name," she said, her voice breaking. Mason shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Figured you might need it," he said. "Makes it easier to cross borders. They respect the Briggs name." Her hands trembled. "You're giving me a new identity." Mason gave her a small smile. "No," he said. "I'm giving you a choice." He pointed to the bottom of the form. "You don't have to take the name. You can leave it blank. You can be anyone. But I figured you might want to stop being a number or a mark. Might want to be something more." Kelra stared at the card for a long time. Her past had been full of scars and fear. But here, in this quiet moment, was something new, not just freedom. Belonging. She looked down at her son, his tiny hands gripping the toy tightly. Then back at Mason, Kelra Briggs. She said aloud. It felt strange on her tongue. "No." Heavy, strong, like armor, like hope. Mason didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes said everything. Later that day, they left the ruined station behind. A borrowed transport ship lifted off the dock with a soft roar. Kelra sat in the passenger seat, her son strapped in beside her. Mason was at the controls, calm and focused. They didn't speak much during the flight. There was too much to feel, too much to process. But when they reached the green world far from the Syndicate's reach, a quiet planet named Tellerond, they finally breathed again. The air was clean, the sun was soft. The sky had 2 moons and birds that sang in strange but beautiful tones. Mason built a new shop on the edge of a small village. This time, it was made of wood and stone, not cold metal. Kelra planted vegetables behind the house. Her son laughed every day and ran barefoot through the soft grass. People came to the village asking questions about parts, machines, even stories from the war. But none of them came to take, only to ask, only to learn. One evening, as the 3 of them sat around a small fire, Kelra looked at the stars above. She remembered the station, the brand on her back, the moment she thought she had nothing left. Then she looked at Mason, sitting beside her, carving another toy, and her son, sleeping safe again with full cheeks and warm hands. She had been a beggar, a ghost, a slave. Now she was Kelra Briggs, a worker, a mother, a fighter. And something else, too. Someone loved, not because she was owned, but because she was chosen by the only man in the stars who saw her not as a burden, but as someone worth saving.